So for those of you who tune into the channel regularly, you'll know that we do a podcast for 2 hours or so on a Wednesday night. And this week on the podcast, one of the big talking points was obviously Crawford versus Postol and who you were picking. And I let the entire panel go first. We had one of the panel picking Postol. We had all the other elements of the panel umming and ahhing, saying it's a close fight, saying it could go either way, maybe picking Crawford, but really nervous about it. And I've actually got to give a shout out here to myself, because I came out and said that I don't see this as a close fight. I came out and said that realistically, in my eyes, there are levels between these two guys. And whilst Viktor Postol may be a good fighter, Crawford with his versatility is potentially a great fighter. And what we witnessed last night in the actual fight between Crawford and Postol was as close as you're going to see to perfection in pugilism. For me, and I don't want to go too overboard here, that will go down as one of the great boxing performances of this decade. On my scorecard, I scored the fight 120 to 105 in favour of Terence Crawford. The judges also had it wide, 118-107 and 117-108. If I'm honest, I cannot really understand how one of the judges gave 3 rounds to Viktor Postol. For me, this was dominant from the very first round all the way through to the very last round, and really cements Terence Crawford as one of the top pound for pound fighters in the sport right now. Let's not forget, the guy he was in there with was definitely the other top light welterweight in the sport. If you take Terence Crawford out of the division, Viktor Postol for me definitely was the number 1 light welterweight there. Last night, as far as I'm concerned, we had a definite fight between number 1 and number 2 in their division, which is rare to see. And to my eye, at least, Crawford won every single round. Part of the reason Crawford is so strong is his versatility and his adaptability. And we see him fight in many different ways. But last night, he completely took Viktor Postol's game plan and ripped it away from him. Put simply, he out-jabbed the jabber. He out-volumed the volume puncher. He took Postol's jab away from him. In many ways, this performance reminded me of Tyson Fury, Vladimir Klitschko, with Terence Crawford being Tyson Fury. Postol, Klitschko, known as the top jabbers out there, known as guys who do everything off the jab. But like Tyson Fury did that night, Terence Crawford's awkwardness, Terence Crawford's movement, Terence Crawford's positioning and timing in the ring meant that the other opponent was nervous to utilise their jab. You know, I was watching Dwyer's pre-fight video the other day, and he made a point, which is that if you look at the light welterweight punch averages per round, Crawford is actually a fighter who punches several punches below the average in terms of output, whereas Postol is a guy who punches higher than average, and that would potentially make a difference in this fight. Having sat through 12 rounds of it, it didn't make a difference. We saw Postol becoming negative. We saw him becoming unable to commit to his jab. We saw him kind of go into a bit of a shell because he was so wary of Crawford, and Crawford was making him miss and countering him and punishing him. And Crawford's judgment of range and his movement was so pivotal to that. If you're wanting to be a boxer, if you're someone who has aspirations to go into that, I would strongly suggest you watch this fight and look at the footwork and the foot speed of Terence Crawford. It's some of the best you will see out there. That footwork and foot speed made it near impossible for Viktor Postol to judge the reins. It made it near impossible for Viktor Postol to get his work off. It made it impossible for Viktor Postol to fight the fight he wanted to fight. Crawford was so elusive in there, constantly moving, constantly coming in and out of range, taking a step, getting his work off, and then being out of distance so Postol would miss when he looked to set up his work. It really was dominant in that sense. He made his opponent low volume, he took away his jab, he moved around him, he was completely elusive, and to sum it up, he was the ring general in there, totally controlling the pace of the fight, totally controlling the action, and as the commentators said on the Box Nation stream that I was watching, the commentators said Crawford looks like he could fight 20 rounds tonight, and he could, because it was so comfort zone with him controlling the pace and dictating the action in there. Crawford's timing was sublime. He knows exactly which punch to throw at which moment. He's got amazing punch variety, and he's able to pick the spot brilliantly. He was also heavy-handed in there. Several times in the fight he rocked Postol, and even though he wasn't fighting the kind of fight where he was necessarily trying to get Postol out of there, his power is a threat, and he does seem to be a naturally heavy-handed guy. When I talk about his punch variety and his punch versatility, he's a guy who doesn't neglect the body. Several times I saw him land southpaw jab, cross, and then Viktor Postol would go back, and he'd go back with his hands up, and Crawford would just drop one down, drop a cross to his body, constantly hitting that accurate spot, constantly picking up points, real good. Even on the inside, and this wasn't really an inside fight, but even when they were holding, even if it was up close, you see Crawford looping punches round from inside, looping punches round in the clinch and catching Postol. It was real sublime stuff. He was dominant in absolutely every way. Offensively, some of the stuff he was doing in there was super advanced. Not only did he out-jab the jabber, not only did he have the power advantage, the timing advantage, the versatility advantage, some of the stuff he was doing was so good. I mean, you saw him throwing like a lead hook, and then he'd spin almost at a 90-degree angle. And Postol is a guy who, he can be quite upright, his stance can be quite wide, and he was getting hit with a power punch, and then he was trying to adjust to Crawford's movement. He got hit, was obviously a little bit wobbled, and then Crawford makes a sharp 90-degree turn, and Postol tries to follow him, and looks like he's more hurt than he was, because he lost balance. He lost balance, taking a punch and then having to spin to keep up with Crawford. And I think it was the fifth round, there were two knockdowns. For me, the first knockdown was, that's exactly how it happened. Crawford comes out, throws a hook, switches the angles. Postol is a little bit hurt by the hook, not anything serious. Tries to move at pace, but he's a bit upright, his stance is a bit wide, and his knee touches the floor. And then later on in that round, his glove also touches the floor. And there was also a point taken off later on in the fight. As I say, perfection in pugilism from Terence Crawford. This guy has it all. When we talk defence in boxing, he may not be defensive like James Toney was. He may not have like a shoulder roll. He may not be doing that kind of defence. But his footwork, his upper body movement is a defence in himself. This is a guy who moves so fluidly. I don't know if you guys noticed this, his ability to duck under punches in this fight, his ability to get low and get out of danger that way, his ability to just take a back step, his ability to pivot and wheel off the ropes. This guy is extremely defensively sound, based largely on his movement, based largely on his reactions. It really was very positive stuff in there. It was the coming out for Terence Crawford in the sense of becoming a top pound for pound name. This is the best guy he's beaten, and it's the best performance of his career by a wide margin as far as I'm concerned. Postol, I've got to say, he was poor. We've talked about his stance and perhaps that making him look like he was slightly off balance at times, but he was poor. He allowed himself to become low volume. his jab was very, very poor. One thing that I thought was, you talk about the top jabbers in the game, and it amazes me how regularly I say this on my channel when fighters don't throw the double jab. What was happening is Postol was throwing a single jab, Crawford was out of range and then would counter. Crawford would duck and counter. Crawford would slip and counter. If Postol had started to double up that jab, it makes it a lot harder to do. You throw a jab, opponent ducks, and you throw another jab. It keeps them at range, even if it's not scoring points. It's very hard to duck under a jab and then duck under a second jab. Usually you can jab, and even if you miss, you can set it up and jab straight away again. Postol wasn't doing that. Single jabs, lazy jabs that allowed Crawford to get under, to avoid the punch and come back, and pick up the points and land big shots. Really poor from Viktor Postol, that I thought, and someone who's known as such a good jabber shouldn't be making what I would consider a rookie error of that nature. His ability to cut off the ring wasn't there. I know Crawford was making it nigh impossible to cut off the ring with his movement and his timing and his footwork in there, but nevertheless, Postol at no point was really able to cut off the ring in the entire 36 minutes of fighting. Postol was a level behind Crawford tonight. For me, Crawford, he maybe isn't the most marketable guy out there. He maybe hasn't got the most marketable personality or the most marketable style. He's got the potential to go down as a great fighter here. He really is a hugely well-rounded fighter. This fight he fought mainly in southpaw. We know he switch hits. We know he's got power. The guy's got everything. The guy's got absolutely everything. For me, as I say, to reiterate, this performance was as close to perfection as you will see in modern boxing. This goes down for me as one of the great dominating boxing performances of the decade. It was real sublime stuff. Terence Crawford is a great fighter. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Let me know your scorecards. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my commentary. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe so you can check out my other stuff. If you're just checking in, please hit the thumbs up button. That would help me out a lot. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Really appreciate it.